Dear student, I, Dr. Shafali Jain, Assistant Professor, Tirthankar Mahavi University. Today, student, we discuss about the marginal utility. Uh, in the previous video, we have also discussed what is utility, the approach of utility, and types of utility. Now, discuss what types of utility. First of all, margin utility. Margin utility is the concept used by economics to to quantify the amount of satisfaction that is gained by consumption of additional units of a good or service. It is an important concept that is used by economics to determine how much quantity of an item a consumer is willing to purchase. It means margin utility is the added satisfaction that a consumer gets from having one more units of a good or service. The concept of marginal utility is used by economics uh, to determine how much item they purchased. मतलब how a consumer are willing to purchase it. Positive margin utility is the added satisfaction of a consumer gets from having one more units of a good or service. The concept of margin utility is used by economists to determine how much of an item consumer are willing to get, willing to gain. The law of diminishing margin utility is often used to justify progressive taxes. Margin utility, the margin types, it means margin utility has to identify how the satisfaction levels influence influence the consumer purchase decision. Types of marginal utility. Marginal utility is three types. First of all, positive margin utility. Second, zero marginal utility. And third, negative marginal utility. Positive marginal utility occurs when having more of an item brings additional happiness. Suppose you like eating a slice of cake, but a second slice would bring you some extra joy. Then your marginal utility from consuming cake is positive. Now, second is zero marginal utility. Zero margin utility is what happens when consuming more of an item brings no extra measure of satisfaction. For example, you might feel fairly full after two slices of cake and wouldn't really feel any better after having a third slice. Now you have fulfilled. You don't want to use next extra third slice. In this case, your margin utility from eating cake is zero. Now, what is negative margin utility? Negative marginal utility is where you have too much of an item, so consuming more is actually harmful. For example, the fourth slice of cake might even make you sick after eating three pieces of cake. I think you have completely understood what is positive margin utility, zero margin utility, and negative margin utility. Positive margin utility is said to occur when the consumption of an additional item increases the total utility, while negative margin utility occurs when the consumption of an additional item decreases the total utility of the item. Uh, Now, I have discussed about three types of utility. I think you have completely understood what is margin utility. Now, it is necessary to know what is the history of margin utility. The concept of the margin utility was developed by economists who were attempting to explain the economic reality of price, which they believed was uh, driven by a product's utility. In the 18th century, economics Adam Smith discussed what is known as the paradox of water and diamond. This paradox states that water has far less value than diamonds. Even through water is vital to human life. Uh, uh, Many example also given to the margin utility, and Adam is also the considered the father of the microeconomics. And I think you have completely understood what is the margin utility, types of margin utility, and positive margin utility, zero margin utility, and negative margin utility. Now, explain how to calculate margin utility. You can calculate margin utility by dividing the change in total utility by the change in number of units. यानी Q margin जैसे in this formula we can also explain it. Margin utility equal delta TU or delta Q. Change in total utility is found subtract the previous total utility from the current total utility. It means TU2 minus TU1. Change in number of units is found by subtract the previous number of units from the current number of units. I think you have understood how we can find out the marginal utility. Now, where the margin utility is applications. Now we discuss about what is the applications of margin utility. Margin utility is used to make a variety of economic decision as why government, businesses, and consumers. Uh, just suppose gov- Government, the law of first of all, government, the law of diminishing margin utility is often used to justify progressive taxes. The idea of that higher taxes causes less loss of the utility, and higher taxes cause less loss of utility for someone with a higher income. In this case, everyone gets diminishing margin utility from money. Suppose that the government must raise 8,000 rupees from each person to pay for its expenses. If the average income is 60,000 rupees before taxes, then the average person would make 50,000 after taxes and have a reasonable standard of living. So government also, it is also helpful for the government to decide the taxes. Now we study about the businesses. Products that often a higher level of satisfaction over time, and after the first time they are used, often a higher level of margin utility. This makes them more valuable to the consumers, so they can be priced higher for greater profits. This can also serve as a guide for businesses to create better products and increase consumer satisfaction by focusing on products that offer higher marginal utility. Margin utility can also guide businesses when deciding uh, which products to innovate or upgrade. A product or service that already has a high level of margin utility becomes even more valuable when it is improved, allowing businesses to continue increasing the price uh, over time. For example, if a car manufacturers have an SUV that is already a top seller, they can create trim levels with additional features or upgrades because the original versions is already popular. With the high margin utility, consumers are more likely to pay the increased price for an even more premium version. I think you have you have understood how margin utility is applicable for the businesses. Now, consumers. Consumers seek out products with higher margin utility because their satisfaction stay high with each additional units purchased. They are more likely to purchase more. They are also more likely to buy similar products from the same company, expecting them to have a similarly high level of margin utility. Higher margin utility often leads to greater consumer satisfaction because consumer feels they are getting their money's worth. They are spending their money is to get some maximum satisfaction. This can lead to brand loyalty over time, as well as the consumer also get pleasure that he gets more and more margin utility. Student, I think you have properly understood what is margin utility. Now we discuss about the total utility. Total utility, uh, total utility is the overall satisfaction that a consumer derive from the consumption of a particular goods and services. Each individual unit of goods or services has a margin utility of their own. Total utility is the sum of major utilities of all such individual items. The primary concern of a consumer is to drive the largest amount of utility with the least cost incurred. To understand total utility, we must look into the concept of the law of diminishing margin utility. It states that as more units of a single good or service are consumed, the additional satisfaction called the marginal satisfaction drops. The first good consumed provides the higher marginal utility, and the second one is little lesser. And so it means total utility is the aggregate amounts of the satisfaction or fulfillment that a consumer received through the consumption of a specific good or service. Total utility is the often compared to marginal utility, which is the satisfaction of a consumer receive from consuming one additional unit of a good or service. Total utility helps economics to understand the demand for goods and service. It means total utility. I can say that total utility is the aggregate sum of satisfaction or fulfillment that a consumer receive through the consumption of a goods or services. Economists seek to quantity utility and total utility using utils in the cardinal utility. Cardinal utility approach is based on the in the cardinal utility we measure the utility in the utils. To best understand total utility, one should understand, I have also explained you that the law of diminishing margin utility, which state that as more of a single good or service is consumed, the additional satisfaction referred as margin utility. And in general, uh, in economics, mainly utility refers to the satisfaction gained from consuming a good or service. Total utility is usually defined as a quantitable sum of satisfaction or happiness obtained from consuming multiple units of a particular goods or services. Utility and total utility are used in economic analysis of consumer behavior within a marketplace. Economists seek to quantify total utility using special calculation. Economists may also study several economic metrics in conjunctions with total utility when seeking to understand how consumer behavior align with supply and demand. In economics, economists typically view changes in behavior and consumption by analyzing marginal increases and marginal decreases. Marginal changes will usually be either scaled increase or scaled decrease. In the case of total utility, marginal refers to the increasing or decreasing level of utility that is obtained with added consumption. Now, I think you have understood what is total utility, I have also explained you that total utility is usually measured in relative units called utils. Uh, Now we read how to calculate total utility. Calculating total utility. Total utility is the sum of utility consumers gains from consuming a product, good or service. The formula for total utility uses utils, which is a unit of measurement for utility. To calculate total utility, add the margin utility of the consumption for each unit. The equations you can use to calculate total utility as is given here. Total utility is equal to margin utility mu1 plus mu2 plus mu3. It means the sum of the margin utility is called the total. I think you have understood what is the formula of the total utility, as if we sum the utilities obtained from the consumption of different units of a particular commodities at a given times, then we get the numerical value of total utility as TU is equal to summation MU is equal to MU1 plus MU2 plus MU3, and where TU total utility, MU1 margin utility obtained from the consumption of first one unit of particular commodity, and commodity so on up to nine units. For example, if a consumer three biscuits and obtain five, four, and three units of utility from the first, second, and third biscuit respectively, then the total utility is 5 plus 4 plus 3 is equal to 12 tells. Economics theory regarding consumer activities suggested that the primary goal of the consumer is to achieve the largest amount of utility for the least amount of cost. This is partly due to the limited amount of funds a person may possess, as well as a desire to achieve as much as satisfaction from the consumption of goods and services as possible. Uh, for example, if a consumer to presented with two purchasing options with the same financial cost and neither option is more necessary or functional than the other, the consumer will choose the good or services that provide the most utility for the money. Here, I will also give an example of total utility. Suppose person, his name is John. John is hungry and decide to eat a chocolate bar. His total utility from eating one chocolate bar is 20 utils. He is still hungry, so he eats another chocolate bar where his total utility is 25 utils. John is still hungry and has two more chocolates bar. The third chocolates bar has a total utility of 27 utils, and the fourth has a total utility of 24 utils. This is the best representation in the uh, 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 this is the best we can also present in the table as first was John gets 20 utils, second was he gets 25 utils, third was he gets 27 utils, and fourth was he gets 24 utils. With each additional chocolate bar, John's total utility increases until it reaches its max three chocolate bar. With the fourth chocolate bar, John's total utility decreases. This can be understood with the margin utility, and I have also understood make you understand what is the margin utility. The utility that John gets. So, with every additional chocolates bar after the first, John's margin utility is decreases, meaning that he is driving less satisfaction from another chocolate bar. This makes sense as he's getting more full with each. var. After the third var, his margin utility is negative, meaning he is getting no satisfaction. Uh, uh, it can be also we can also explain it with the diagrams and schedule. I think you have completely understood what is the total utility, what is the margin utility. In the briefly, we see here total utility. What's it is the aggregate of satisfaction that a consumer derive from the consumption of any particular goods or service. Margin utility, it is the amount of satisfaction derived by a consumer by additional consumption of a unit of any particular goods and services. Now, what rate of increase total utility rises as more consumption is done. Margin utility diminishes with an increase in total utility. Result, it suffers from diminishing returns. Margin utility reduced with the consumption of each additional units. Now, we discuss about the relationship between total utility and marginal utility. There is a direct relationship between total utility and marginal utility. Total utility always based on marginal utility. As a total utility, TU is the summation of marginal utilities. The relationship between TU and MU can be explained with the help of the following table. In this table, units of goods and of consumers consumed when the consumer consumed first unit of good, he get total utility 10 and margin utility 10. On the second unit of consumed, the consumer get total utility 18 and margin utility 8. With the consume of the third unit, the consumer get 24 total utility and get 6 margin utility. With the unit of fourth consumed, the consumer get 28 total utility and get 4 utils margin utility. With the consume of the fifth unit, the consumer get 30 utils total utility and only two utils margin utility. And with the use of the sixth unit, the consumer get total utility. Here the total utility had maximum because the consumer has fulfilled. Now he get no marginal utility, he gets zero. In this point, the TU is maximum and stable and total margin utility is zero. With the use of the units of seventh units of goods consumed, the consumer get negative total utility, diminishing total utility, sorry, 28 utils and negative total margin utility minus 2. Here, total utility is decreasing and MU is negative. In the above table, I think you have there is a three forms of the in this table. There are three forms of margin utility: MU as positive, zero, and negative margin utility. Up to 5 units of consumption margin utility is decreasing and remains positive until the margin utility MU is positive. Total utility, rises as a decline rate. When a consumer consumes the sixth units of that commodity, he gets no utility or there is zero utility, and as a result, total utility remains constant and become maximum. After the sixth unit, if the consumer keeps consuming or he consumed the seventh units of the commodity, margin utility becomes negative, and with negative margin utility, MU total utility start to decline. Now we can also see in this diagram, in this in the diagram, TU, the total utility curve, and MU is the margin utility curve. As the consumer consumes the first units of the commodity, he obtains 10 units of utility. Here both TU and MU are same. When the consumer consumes second units of goods, TU in total utility increases to 18 utils from 10 utils, and margin utility decreases to 8 utils. By editing Margin utilities and TU is obtained according when the consumer consumes the sixth units of goods, margin utility decreases to zero, where total utility becomes maximum 30 utils. After the sixth unit consumptions of good, margin utility is negative -2, and due to negative margin utility, total utility declines to 28 utils from 30 utils. Thus, the consumer gets maximum satisfaction when margin utility is zero. That point is known as the point of satiety, yeah, saturations. Therefore, total utility and margin utility and their relationship uh, can be summarized as below. In this here, the total utility curves begin from the origin, increases as a decreasing rate reaches a maximum and then starts falling. Margin utility curve is slope of the total utility curve and given by the margin utility is equal to delta total utility divided delta Q. Uh, when total utility is maximum, margin utility is zero. It is the referred as the saturation points. It indicates that units of goods are consumed till the saturation point until the total utility is curve is concave, as you see in the diagram. The margin utility curve is downward sloping and remains above the x-axis. Once when TU curve is falling, the MU curve became negative. The falling parts of the MU curve is demonstrate the law of diminishing margin utility. Strengths, I think you understood properly what is total utility and what is margin utility. What is the relationship between total utility and margin utility? How we can measure it and how we can measure it. We can also understood the diagram and schedule. Hope you have understood properly. Thanks. Thank you very much.